I was representing an individual who had been involved in a very significant motor vehicle accident, and a few months later he calls me and he says that his brother had been involved in what may or may not have been a motor vehicle accident. So I inquired further. He says that his brother had a heart attack while driving his car. In fact, what he did is he kissed his wife goodbye and drove off to work. And regrettably that day he never made it to work. And he had a heart attack while driving. He was bouncing off of the guardrails and eventually flew into a ditch. But he had no other injuries other than what happened was it took emergency crews and EMS about 35 minutes to finally get a normal sinus rhythm, so to really get his heart pumping again. But by then he had catastrophic cognitive devastation to his brain, and he just wasn't there anymore. And so normally that wasn't really a car accident. I had to make the car accident, I had to make the use or operation of the car key to his injuries. And so we tracked down, my assistant actually tracked down the tow truck driver. There was a tow truck driver there who was on the scene within 60 seconds. And I was on the phone with the tow truck driver, and tell me what you saw, what happened, what you did. And he said that first he approached the car and the driver's side door wouldn't open. And that was great because that was perhaps delayed intervention because of the use or operation of a car. But then he says, yeah, but it wasn't really a big deal because he ran to the other side and got in immediately. So I said, well, what did you do? And he says, well, I couldn't really do much. I just sort of propped him up and called 911 and waited. And that was about it. The case was practically over. And it was a terrible case. This gentleman was unfortunately going to be disabled, completely disabled for the rest of his life. His wife was already on disability. He was the sole breadwinner. And this family was in dire straits. So then I finally asked, I was just about to hang up with the tow truck driver, and I said, by the way, sir, do you know CPR? And he says, yes, of course. I used to be a paramedic in British Columbia. And I said, well, I couldn't believe it. And I said, well, why didn't you administer CPR? He says, well, I couldn't. The car was precarious on this ledge and it was about to fall off, and there was a soft seat and I couldn't press hard enough, and there was this middle console that I couldn't really get myself onto. Well, what happened when the EMS people showed up? Well, it took about 16 of them about 10 minutes to prop the car up with skids and to make it secure until they could actually get in the car. And they tried to give CPR in the car but couldn't do it for the same reasons I couldn't. And then it finally took them a few more minutes to finally extricate the gentleman from the car, and then and only then could they administer CPR amongst other treatment and to finally revive his heart. So I finally had my delayed intervention that caused or contributed to the injuries because of the use or operation of a motor vehicle. And off I went and I made a claim for accident benefits, and the insurance company promptly denied them, saying it wasn't a car accident. We went off to arbitration at the Financial Services Commission of Ontario, and to my shock, the first decision at first instance was against us, said it was not a car accident. Then I immediately appealed, and on appeal, the original decision was overturned, and we were successful, and the decision was that it was a car accident and the gentleman was entitled to full accident benefits. The insurance company appealed that appeal, and just before the hearing date, assuming that they knew that they were not going to be successful, we entered into the most favorable of settlements, and the case resolved very favorable to my client. Regrettably, actually, I can advise that this gentleman, it was a few years later, but only recently, a few months ago, passed away. But that was one of the most significant cases I've ever been involved in, one of the saddest, and certainly one of the most fulfilling.